you kind of get used to some of the sounds that are out there. We have gibbons, Siamang gibbons that call periodically throughout the day, and they're singing. I like to call it singing. It kind of happens for about 5-10 minutes at a time, and it's very loud. You can hear it all over the park.
Can you venture an imitation?
Okay. Ooh, 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 ooh.
Spot on. I can easily draw similarities between working in broadcast news and working at a zoo. And Jim Bartoo has done both. Believe it or not, his TV experience helped him land his first zoo job, which led him to working with the legendary Jack Hanna. And we'll get to all of that in just a bit. These days, Jim heads up marketing at the Nashville Zoo, where a lot of thought goes into which animals to bring in and how to build their habitats. Now, we did pay a visit to the zoo's new social media celebrity, Hamish, the Scottish Highland calf, but he didn't have much to say that day. So we spent some time with a group of rambunctious lorikeets who were just getting their day started.
This is lorikeet landing here at the Nashville Zoo. Lorikeet landing has 8 different species of lorikeets in it, but we do have over 50 individuals overall between all those species, and they're all flying past us right now. But so you're hearing all the excited little chirps and whistles. We just let them out this morning, so this is very normal behavior. They're the most active during the morning. So if anyone wants to come and visit Lorikeet Landing, the morning when we open is the best time to get them all active and excited. They do all have individual names in here, and I do recognize all of them. It seems a little crazy, but we're with them every single day, so I do know Wendell from Sonic, from Simon, and so on. That's the best part, when they all fly in that flock right by you.
I'm Demetria Kalodimos. It's Banner and Company. I read and I know that from knowing you that you got your professional start in TV news, which is not too far removed from a zoo itself. So,
right, yeah.
It was a natural fit, I guess you could say.
Yeah, a lot of people in TV, particularly those people that are on air, like yourself, they move into a public relations role because they already really know how the system works, right? And I was kind of the same way. I was not on air. I was a producer for television news, but I knew what a story was, right? I knew what it took to put together a story. And because of that, I was able to really build story ideas and pitch story ideas to the media and had it all packaged up that made it super easy for them to pick up. When you can make somebody else's job easier, they're much more likely to accept what it is that you're giving them and put it on air.
Was there any foreshadowing of a life with animals? Were you into animals growing up? Exotic pets?
I was, yeah. I spent, up until I was about 12, we lived in Cleveland, Ohio, and they had a Wildlife on Wheels van that would drive around. They had this giant snake, like this Burmese python or something. And it came to the church that I was going to at the time, and I loved carrying that snake. And the guy that always showed up knew who I was, and he would always hand me this 12-foot snake. And I'm, it's like 7 at the time. So I'm like, 4 feet high, something like this. And I've got this snake going over my shoulders and around my neck and down one leg and over to the other and up. And I'm wandering around the room.
Scaring the girls.
Showing other kids who were completely freaked out by it. But yeah, I really love that part. But I don't think I ever kind of put it together that I would be working in a zoo, because I always thought working in a zoo means caring for animals. And I never really kind of went down that route of study.
You guys being you and your wife Carol, who I worked with, full disclosure, worked
Right.
with at Channel 4, the amazing Carol Hauser.
Yes.
You guys met in Chattanooga?
We did, yeah. One of the first jobs that I got out of college was working as a producer for Channel 12 in town there. And shortly after I worked there, about 8 months after I worked there, I was offered a job at Channel 9, and that's where Carol works. So we met in the newsroom. I was producing. She was a health reporter at the time, but she was also anchoring the noon desk. And that's how we met. And when her contract was up at Channel 9, she was offered a job up in Columbus, Ohio. And we were dating at the time. And I decided to follow her up there. And she said, not unless you're going to marry me. And I said, well, okay, let's do that. So
How romantic.
I know. Yeah, that's how it worked out. So I went up there. And again, I started looking for advertising work because that's what I majored in college. Didn't really find anything. So I picked up a part-time job at the Columbus Zoo, working in their guest services department, ringing in guests, school groups, driving the tram around, selling stroller rentals, wheelchair rentals, stuff like that. And one day I discovered that they had a marketing department. I had no idea that zoos had marketing departments. So they invited me up. I took a tour. They took me into their media room. This is the zoo that had Jack Hanna.
Right.
If
Yeah.
anybody knows who Jack Hanna is, great animal ambassador. And he was really prominent at the time that I was up there. So they had this huge video library, and it was in complete disarray. And a local TV station had donated 3/4-inch tape-to-tape decks that were in this room, and nobody in the marketing department knew how to work it. And so I walked in and I said, oh, 3/4-inch tape-to-tape. That's what I trained on when I was in news. And they said, how would you like a job? And that's how I got started in marketing at zoos. Yeah. And then we got married. We had our first daughter, and everything changes when you have kids. And we spent most of our time traveling to Chattanooga, where I was from, or St. Louis, where Carol was from. And we finally decided we need to be closer to home. So we made a conscious decision to move closer to home, with Nashville being ideal because it's kind of in between the two cities. And it had a huge health industry here. The medical and health industry here is huge. So it was big enough for her to be able to say, I could be a health reporter in this town.
And the first health reporter who was an RN, I might add.
That's right. Yeah. She actually came to Channel 4 here, and the way that she tells it, talked the news director into creating a position.
Uh-huh.
And that's really how it started. And just as we were packing up to move down, a job at the Nashville Zoo opened up. The marketing and public relations director job at the Nashville Zoo opened up. And Jack Hanna gave Rick Schwartz a call and said, you need to meet this guy, Jim, because he's coming down to your area, and he's someone that you may want to think about. And Rick offered me the job, and I've been in that job for 25 years.
Let's talk a little bit about Jack Hanna just for a moment. I mean,
Okay.
he was the darling of the Carson show. He would bring some sort of critter on it, would climb up Johnny's back, and,
Right.
laughs ensued. But was he really an animal expert, or was he just a personality?
Well, I think a lot of people become animal experts just by being exposed into that realm of things. So I think Jack was an animal expert to a degree. He was the kind of person that owned a lot of really exotic animals as a child growing up in Tennessee. Actually, he lived out in East Tennessee, and his parents had a farm, and they had all kinds of crazy animals out there back before laws prevented you from having those types of animals in there. So he knew his animals, right? But he was engaged in so many different species. And when he became the kind of person that goes on air and talks about the animals over and over again, a lot of times he may not know necessarily everything about this particular porcupine that he's holding or this particular beaver that bites him in the hand, right? What his specialty was almost a planned chaos, right? Chaos on television is gold.
Sure.
People love watching things get out of hand on TV. And that's kind of where he made his name for himself, because you knew when he came out and sat down in that chair that something crazy was going to happen. And typically it did. And it put Columbus on the map. The Columbus Zoo wasn't really well known before that. And it put the zoo on the map. It's arguably the biggest attraction, not only in Columbus, but Central Ohio as a whole. Everybody comes to see that place.
So we thank Jack Hanna for that, and also for bringing you.
That's right. Yeah.
To the
He's
Nashville
the one
Zoo.
that helped me get the job here.
It's Banner and Company. I'm Demetria Kaladimos. We'll be right back.
Still getting around to that fix on your car? You got this. On eBay, you'll find millions of parts guaranteed to fit. Doesn't matter if it's a major engine repair or your first time swapping your windshield wipers. eBay has that part you need, ready to click perfectly into place for changes big and small. Loud or quiet, find all the parts you need at prices you'll love. Guaranteed to fit every time. But you already know that. eBay. Things, people, love. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply.
Zoos have come a long way, at least since my youth. I remember going to the Lincoln Park Zoo in the heart of the city in Chicago, and it was an animal jail pretty much when we were growing up.
It was a lot of zoos were like that. They were like museums almost, where you go and look at a display, walk a little bit, look at a display. And at the time, the philosophy behind keeping animals was, if you're going to keep an animal healthy, you have to keep it clean. And if you're going to keep an animal clean, you've got to put it into an environment that you can clean and sterilize. And so it was thought less about what the animal's mental issues were and more about its physical well-being. And I think that people in animal care in general have learned a lot over the years. You know, when you were younger, you also didn't have 2 aisles of dog food to choose from. Right? Our society has grown to understand and really love animals a lot more, and zoos have kind of followed that path and led that path to be able to say, all right, these animals need a natural environment. Otters need as much land as they need water, because land is where they mate and have babies and nest and everything. It isn't just a tank of water that they can swim around in all day. So they learn these things over time, and as a result, these habitats get better and better for the animal. To add into that, people, because they have a greater love for animals, expect to see animals in a very natural environment. To them, that shows that the animal is happy, right? We don't know if the animal's happy or not because it doesn't talk to us, but we know that it isn't picking at its fur. We know it isn't pacing. We know it's breeding. We know it's eating well. We have all these signs that show us that these animals are in good condition and they're being treated well.
Give us a little thumbnail of the Nashville Zoo, because when I first came to town, it was out in Cheatham County. It was very ambitious,
Right.
but boy, has it come far.
It has, yeah. Out in Cheatham County, it was about 100 acres. It was split by a big ravine, so people couldn't get down one side of this hill that it sat on. And it was split rail fences and chain link and things like that. And it was a beautiful area of the country, but it was 45 minutes outside of town. And that limited the amount of people that could go and visit it. We had the chance to relocate to the Grassmere property in 1996. And we took that and basically started moving animals over there, and really officially opened in 97. And we've been building from the ground up. The Grassmere property, which used to be the Grassmere Wildlife Park, had maybe a dozen exhibits of native animals that were there. So we slowly started adding in more animals into that area and replacing a lot of those habitats. But at the beginning, there really was not a whole lot there. It was largely undeveloped property with a few animal exhibits in it. I like to tell people that the best exhibit that we had when I got there was the backhoe.
In the wild.
That's right.
In its
right.
natural
We had 8-year-old
state.
boys come from miles around to stand all day long and watch that thing dig a hole.
You know, I've always been interested in how a collection of animals comes to be. You said you started with like the native species. Then how in the world do you find animals?
That's a really good question. Largely zoos, accredited zoos that are accredited by the Association of Zoos and Aquariums, share all the information about their populations that they have, including animals that they may have in surplus or animals that they know that they're going to be breeding and will need a place to go when these babies become old enough. So it's all part of a giant system that tracks them. There are people that track individual species, and they keep what's called a stud book. So they try to figure out who's breeding with who to make sure that we're not that we're creating a diversified genetic gene pool for the animals that are under human care. So part of it comes from availability of animals that are out there, but we look at a lot of other issues when we're trying to determine what animals are we going to bring to the zoo. We have a long-term plan about animals that we want to bring. It's an animal management plan that we have. A lot of that has to do with conservation work. What is being done with these animals right now? Is it underrepresented? Is there more conservation work that needs to be done? And should we be bringing this animal out to bring a better understanding of these animals and therefore more support of keeping them on the planet? And I'm going to use a big word here, fecundity, which is basically their breedability, right? What is their breeding status? Do they breed easy in captivity? Are there a lot of them to be bred? Do they need to be bred? Are the individual animals that we're getting, is their genetics valuable to where we want this animal to breed with another animal to keep that diversity within that population? So there's that, there's availability. I've written a bunch down here. Care management. What does it take to care for these animals? A polar bear swims, climbs, digs. Keeping this animal in a climate condition that it's going to be comfortable with takes a lot of money to build and a lot of care to take care of an animal like that. Do we have the staffing to do that? If we bring in a whole new troop of monkeys, how many more people are we going to have to add to our team to care for this troop of monkeys? So that's kind of considered as well. Climate, cost, how much is it going to cost to build the exhibit? Polar bear exhibit, it's a really good example of that. Financial support. Do we have people in the community that are interested in helping us build these exhibits? We're a 501c3 nonprofit organization. We don't get money from the city or money from the state to operate. We depend on members. We depend on people to visit. We depend on donors to be able to operate what we need.
Is that true of most zoos?
No. A lot of zoos have ongoing state or government funding. Ohio's a good example of that. All the zoos in Ohio run, a lot of their operations run on a property tax, a percentage of like a portion of a penny that they get from property tax. And it can be a lot of money that they receive pretty consistently on an annual basis. We don't get that. Now we get money for infrastructure because we don't own the Grassmere property. The property is actually listed as a parks property for the city. They've leased it to us for like $1 a year for the next 40 years for the purpose of building a zoo. So if they don't renew our lease and we have to pack up and leave with all of our animals, there'll still be a giant parking garage there and the electricity and the water and the sewer and everything else that stays. So they do help us with that. It's usually, we have to ask for it. And it usually comes with stipulations like matching it with private donation dollars to be able to make that work.
And you're an ad guy. You got to have animals people want to see.
That's
that
right.
they're excited about.
That's part of it as well. Yeah. We kind of pride ourselves to have animals that are unusual, animals that you don't typically see. But with that, there's also animals that you would typically see at a zoo that we may not have, like lions, right? We don't have any lions at the zoo.
Is that a disappointment to some people? We certainly have snow leopards.
We have clouded leopards.
Clouded leopards,
Yes,
sorry.
we have clouded leopards. Let's see, that's a great example, is that we have these great clouded leopards, but everybody thinks that they're snow leopards because they're just unusual, and that's just an education part. But some people do. Some people that are coming from out of town and they're comparing Nashville to whatever zoo they're used to. And they're like, where are all the lions? Where are the penguins? Those kind of things. And we have to tell people, well, we're still, relatively speaking, we're a very new zoo. Starting in 1997 is relatively recent. If you think about most zoos in the country starting just after World War II, or even the turn of the century in the early 1900s.
Who are our star animals? I mean, yeah, they may be funky or a little weird, but
Yeah.
I mean, you learn how to love them and you certainly recognize them after you see them for the first time.
Right. Yeah. Well, clouded leopard certainly is one of the key animals that we have here. And I'm a little kind of set back because for years and years I've been dying to get on Good Morning America.
Yeah.
Right. To show off all these great, amazing animals that we have. And finally, just a couple of weeks ago, we
It
got
happened.
a chance to be on air for a cow. Of all things, we got coverage for a cow. And so we're sending out to the rest of America this great zoo that has these stunning exhibits. We're telling the rest of America, Nashville Zoo has a cow, right?
Not-
a beautiful cow.
Not
super
just
cute
any cow.
A super cute cow.
Explain what he did to get himself noticed.
Well, he played in a field. He jumped around and frolicked in the snow. He was a calf, still is a calf at the time, and he was jumping around and playing and happy to be in the snow at a time when all the kids in Nashville are doing the same thing. They're out of school, they're jumping around in the snow. So it married in really well to kind of the culture of life around here. And Good Morning America just thought it was super cute.
And I understand that Hamish, who was our little
Right.
calf,
Scottish Highland calf.
they're the ones with the neat, like,
Shaggy
hair.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
The shaggy bangs that hang down over their eyes, but they still have the horns, and they've got this beautiful reddish color to them. And they get pretty big too. Yeah.
Is he going to be a permanent visitor?
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, we're training him on a lead so we can take him out into the public and have him meet the public and get used to big crowds of people and being around a lot of people, because our hopes is that when he's a full adult, he'll still be calm enough that we can take him out into the public and have people come up and get their picture made with him and get close to him, because that's one of the things that people really enjoy, is that closeness, that tactile touch, that ability to get next to an animal that you typically don't get next to. Down here in the South, there's a lot of people who can get next to cows, but Highland cow at a zoo, that's special for a lot of people.
It's Banner and Company. My guest is Jim Bartoo from the Nashville Zoo. We'll be right back. We've got some weird lizard amphibian kind of critters that faces only a mother could love, but why are they interesting?
Well, we do a lot of conservation work with hellbenders, and these are salamanders, giant salamanders.
Like, how big we talking?
18 inches, 24 inches they can get. They're pretty good size. And they live under big rocks in big rivers in Tennessee, and they're very endangered. They're not making it through childhood into adulthood. They're disappearing for whatever reason: climate change, pollution, water runoff, or fertilizer runoff. Lots of different issues as to why they may be disappearing. So we're doing a lot of conservation work. We have a Head Start program, which means that we hatch eggs in captivity. We raise them to a certain point where they're beyond, where they can start to make it on their own. And then we put them back into the wild again.
Can you tag something like that or chip something like that?
We actually, yeah, and we do that. Yeah, and we can follow them around, right? So we go to these areas where people that own land around these areas have permitted us to come in and go into the rivers and release these animals back on some of the rivers that they're in. I can't tell you specifically where it is because that's part of the deal, is that we keep all this stuff kind of on the down low, but we are re-releasing them back into rivers. And they've got these flaps on the side of their body, so they look like a big wrinkly kind of salamander. Some people call them snot otters because they release this slimy stuff on their skin if you were to hold them or capture them.
What's worse, hellbender or snot otter?
I kind of like snot otter, actually. I think that might sell more T-shirts.
The ad man comes out.
That's right.
Now, what do you do if animals just don't work out? And have you ever had a situation like that where it's like, this ain't working for the Nashville Zoo? We
have, yeah. We had African wild dogs a while back in an exhibit that's now Kangaroo Kickabout. And they weren't, we had two groups that we tried to put together from two different zoos, and they just were not getting along. They kept beating each other up, and it wasn't healthy for them to be in that environment.
Could you kind of guessed wild dogs would be a problematic
Well, they're at other zoos, and in some zoos they get along quite well.
Really?
Right? There's a hierarchy in dog packs.
Sure.
It's usually the alpha female that kind of leads the pack. So in this particular situation, they kept beating up the lowest dog on the totem pole. And then if we were to remove that dog, it would be the next one in line. And it was just a very aggressive group of dogs. So we eventually decided to send those dogs to a zoo that had success with keeping and breeding those dogs.
So what's on the wish list?
Well, I can tell you that we are making plans to bring orangutans in soon. We have, we're in the design phase for an exhibit like that. That was on our animal management plan for growth, and we have a donor that's interested in helping us fund something like that. So when you have those kind of decisions that fall into place like that, that's when we really start acting on those kinds of growth and development.
There's a giraffe on some of the logos, or there used to be, but there's no giraffe.
For the first, I think, 5 years that I worked at the zoo, we had that logo, and we didn't even have a giraffe exhibit. And I caught hell for it.
I bet.
All the time. The giraffes have been off exhibit since November of 2022 while we build this new exhibit called Leopard Forest. And the reason why they're off exhibit is the pathway that leads up to giraffe has been completely ripped out. When you walk through up to giraffes now you'll be routed through a wandering boardwalk that takes you by 5 new exhibits that we're going to have. So that'll be opening up soon. We'll be able to bring giraffes back. We have giraffes. Mm-hmm. The public just can't see them. You can get a backstage pass program and go and feed them, but you can't get up to see them, and it's mainly because of the construction.
So they are coming back.
They are, but they're here.
They're coming back to public life.
Right. The public will again be able to get up to the giraffe exhibit once we open up Leopard Forest. Yeah.
Now, what is the grocery bill like? I mean, are you guys bringing in like tons of fruit? And I imagine heads of lettuce and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, lots of different stuff that's there. I don't know if I know the price tag to it. It's a lot. It's a lot of money that we spend on produce, and it's not the kind of stuff that gets thrown away from.
Yeah, it's not trashed.
It's restaurant quality food, right? And some of these animals need a very particular diet. They need to eat macadamia nuts every day, or they need to get an ant protein that's only available in this compound that you buy out of Chile or something like that. But I mean, we have a team of 5 or 6 people that do nothing but prepare food for the animals.
Sous chefs and
we do.
servers.
That's right. Yeah, they wear
Someone
hats.
with a peppermill.
Yeah, they got a hat on. Yeah, yeah. And you hear them say, "Yes, chef," in the background as they're preparing this.
I know that people are also fascinated with the veterinary care, the actual medical and wellness care that the animals get. And you guys open that up to the public. They can see it.
We did, yeah. And in the design phase, that was the main focus. Is we really wanted to invite the public to come and watch the animal care that's taking place. So you can walk up to the vet center, and you can look into the windows and see the treatment that's being done on the animals if there's something that's happening there. The nursery's up there as well. It's a state-of-the-art facility. If you've ever been up to see it or ever been inside of it, the equipment that's in there is just as good as any hospital that a human would go to. It is outstanding in every way. And it really, really opens up people to see the quality of care that's being given to these animals. For years, zoos didn't want to show that for whatever reason. They didn't think people wanted to see the blood and the guts and the things that come about with animal care. And they really just wanted to show you a polished, finished habitat that you could look at. And what we've discovered over time is if you don't show them what's behind the curtain, they start making up their own stories. Like anything else in the public relations industry, if you don't control the story controls you. You have to be able to get in front of it and say, here's what's happening. We're showing you what's happening so you don't have to make it up and spread stories about what might be happening behind the scenes. So that was really, a lot of it was to be able to say, we want to show you the quality of care that we're bringing these animals. We've been giving this quality of care for ever since we've been around.
Sure.
But to actually show it to the public lets the public know that what we're doing for the animals is top-notch quality care.
This is probably a crazy question, but is it possible for something to escape? I'm sure you design it so that there's, there's
a lot of safety measures in place. But yeah, I mean, there's always a possibility that something could go wrong or somebody could leave a chute open or a gate open or something and just forget. When you're caring for these animals day in and day out, there's a process that you go through, and that includes a safety process. And you need to make sure that all those safety processes are met to the letter as you're moving your way through this. If you're doing this year after year after year, there could be days when you're like, did I lock that? Did I close that? 99.9% of the time, everything's fine. But yeah, it can possibly happen. It can also happen the first time you put an animal into an exhibit, particularly a new exhibit, because you don't know how that animal's going to react in there. You have an idea. You understand how their character is. You understand what they are capable of, and you build an exhibit for that very need. But until you actually get them in there, you're not quite sure if you know that that's going to be successful.
I mean, I'm thinking of a bird, one open window or door and they could
go. Yeah. Well, we have birds that are free flight birds in our animal show, and they will fly off periodically up into trees, and the keepers will spend, it could be minutes to hours trying to get the animal back again. Usually it's up in a tree. When that happens, when an animal gets outside of the environment that it's used to, it usually becomes nervous, and you can tell because of just the actions of this animal. Typically, this animal wants to get back to where it's comfortable, into the area that it knows about. The keepers will coax birds out of trees with food, and the birds will fly right back to their arms again.
Wow.
So that's typically what happens. We rarely lose them forever.
Another crazy question, forgive me, but I have so many ideas about zoos that are probably myths. Severe weather. I mean, we all go undercover. We worry about our safety. I mean, do animals freak out in severe weather?
They can, yeah. We will bring animals inside, just like you would go inside to get out of the weather. We'll bring animals inside to be able to protect them as well. But some can really freak out. Others are, they just kind of look around or are aware of it. But, for the most part, we make sure that all of our animals are safe if we see severe weather approaching.
Banner and Company is a production of the New Nashville Banner. Our producers are Steve Harouche and Andrea Tudhope. Original music is by Verlin Thompson. You can subscribe wherever you get your podcasts or go to NashvilleBanner.com. You're in good company. All right. Cool. We do a little thing on our podcast here where the final question is in the fishbowl.
Oh.
No hellbender in there, but there are 2 questions. And these are posed by previous guests, so.
Do I get both of these?
No, just one.
All right.
Just one, Jim.
All right. All right, this is from Alicia Haddock. What brought...
We covered that.
I think we already covered that.
Yeah, but...
So I think we're good to go. But yeah.
Let's change it.
What brought you
How
to
did you get to Nashville? What were you driving?
What was I driving? Oh, I believe at the time I was driving a Corolla, a Toyota Corolla, and it was stuffed with live plants in the back. As I came down here, I remember specifically saying, I'm going to take the Blue Ridge Parkway on my way to Nashville.